What you just heard, those weren't just random sounds. They were the sounds of a war inside my own head. The frantic search for an answer, the frustration of two conflicting philosophies, the tiny, fleeting win, and the silence of not knowing what to do next. My name doesn't matter. You can just call me the narrator. And this channel, ProfitWithA, is where I document the real, practical journeys of making money, losing it, and learning from the fallout. The accounts I'm sharing today are not theory. They're not guesses. They are my real, lived financial experiments from the past few years. Documented. Raw. Practical. For years, I was torn. On one side, the voice of Dave Ramsey, a voice of discipline, safety, and guaranteed freedom from debt. On the other, the voice of Robert Kiyosaki, a voice of risk, opportunity, and building wealth that works for you. It's the most famous debate in personal finance. And in 2025, I decided to stop listening and start testing. I took their core principles out of the books and into my real life. What you're about to hear is a walkthrough of the exact steps I took. The budgets I followed, the assets I bought, the mistakes I made, and the brutal, honest lessons I learned. This isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about what worked, what didn't, and what might work for you. Before we open these case files, make sure you're subscribed to ProfitWithA and hit the notification bell. Whether you're Team Dave, Team Robert, or stuck in the middle like I was, what we uncover in this reality test could be the blueprint for your own financial path. And you won't want to miss the final verdict. To run this reality test, I had to establish a baseline. I had to know where every single dollar was going. And that meant starting with the foundation. Log 2025-01, the zero-based budget experiment. It was January 1, 2025. I was sitting at this very desk, hungover not from champagne, but from the sheer weight of my own financial ambiguity. I had a decent job, but my bank account was a mystery. Money came in, money went out, and I was left with a vague feeling of anxiety at the end of every month. I had read Dave Ramsey's book until the spine was cracked, and his message was clear: you must tell your money where to go, instead of wondering where it went. So I opened a new spreadsheet. I called it the blueprint. The first action was simple, yet profoundly tedious. I gathered every bank statement, every credit card bill, every receipt from the last 3 months. For 4 hours, I categorized every single transaction. Coffee, groceries, subscriptions I'd forgotten about, that random Amazon purchase for a kitchen gadget I used once. It was an archaeological dig into my own financial carelessness. I assigned every dollar of my upcoming paycheck a job, down to zero. Every single dollar. The first 2 weeks were excruciating. I felt like I was in financial handcuffs. The spreadsheet wasn't a tool, it was a warden. I remember the sound of my stomach grumbling at 3 p.m. because I'd already spent my weekly eating out budget on a rushed lunch on Tuesday. The feeling of declining a friend's invite to a concert because my entertainment envelope was empty. It was a constant, low-grade frustration. I'd stare at the miscellaneous line item, rationalizing that a new set of headphones was, in fact, miscellaneous. The learning curve wasn't about math, it was about discipline. It was a battle against my own impulsivity. The turning point came at the end of month 1. I was reconciling my accounts, dreading the inevitable overspend. But as I entered the final numbers, something clicked. The spreadsheet balanced. To the dollar. For the first time in my adult life, I had not spent more than I made. There was no grand prize, no PayPal ping. Just a quiet, profound sense of control. The win wasn't a deposit, it was the absence of debt. I had finally stopped the bleeding. The reality is, I still use a version of that budget. It's less rigid now, but the principle is embedded in my life. The lesson was undeniable: awareness is the first step to control. I discovered over $150 a month in wasted subscription fees. I learned that my small, daily coffee habit was a $100 a month line item. The budget didn't make me rich, but it gave me the one thing every money journey needs: a clear starting point. At ProfitWithA, we classify this as a foundational truth. You cannot build a house on mud. Dave Ramsey's budget gave me solid ground. But a foundation is just something to stand on. It doesn't automatically build wealth. And that restless feeling, that question of what's next, led me directly to the other side of the debate. And to my next experiment. Log 2025-02, the Dividend Snowflake Machine. By February, my budget was humming. I had a new line item: wealth building, $100. It wasn't much, but it was something. And it was burning a hole in my digital pocket. I had just reread a chapter from Kiyosaki, the one where he talks about assets that put money in your pocket. I wasn't ready for real estate. But I kept circling one word: dividends. The idea of a machine that spits out money while you sleep. So, with my allocated $100, I opened a brokerage app on my phone. It felt dangerously easy. The first action was research, which quickly became analysis paralysis. ETFs, REITs, yield percentages. I felt out of my depth. So I simplified. I decided my first mission wasn't to get rich, it was to buy a single share of a company that paid dividends. 1. I settled on a boring, established company with a long history of paying shareholders, a classic value stock I'd heard mentioned on financial shows. I remember the click of the review order button. The commission was zero, but the feeling was immense. I was now an investor. The struggle here was psychological. The market would dip the day after I bought, and my $100 investment would be worth $97. I'd feel a pang of nausea. This was my carefully budgeted money. I wasn't building a snowball, I was watching a snowflake melt. I'd check the app 5 times a day, hearing the little swoosh sound it made, each time hoping for green arrows but often seeing red. The learning curve was about emotional control. Kiyosaki talks about building assets, but he doesn't prepare you for the gut churn of watching its value fluctuate daily. The win was almost silent. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 months after I started. I opened my brokerage app, not to check the stock price, but to log in for my monthly budget reconciliation. And there it was. A transaction I didn't make. A deposit. 37 cents, dividend. It was 37 cents. I actually laughed out loud. But in that moment, the theory became reality. The machine had turned on. It was a tiny, almost insignificant drip. But it was a drip into my account, not out. The asset had spoken. The reality is, that drip is now a small stream. I've continued investing that $100 every month, buying more shares, and the dividends have slowly grown. The lesson was profound. Kiyosaki is right about the psychological power of an asset that generates income. It changes your mindset from, I trade hours for dollars, to, my money is working for me. But the other lesson was that it starts incredibly small, and it requires you to be comfortable with volatility and the terrifying truth that the number on screen can go down. At ProfitWithA, we classify this as an activated asset. It's not about the amount, it's about the principle being actively demonstrated in your life. One system gave me control. The other gave me a glimpse of a new mindset. But I was still thinking too small. I was playing defense with Dave and playing a very slow game of offense with Robert. I needed a bigger test. I needed to see if I could truly create an asset from scratch. That's when I turned to the digital world, and things got interesting. With a budget controlling my spending and a single stock paying me pennies, I felt a new tension. Discipline versus opportunity. I had a stable foundation, but I was itching to build something on top of it. Something that was truly mine. That's when I decided to test one of Kiyosaki's core concepts, building a business asset. The dumb digital product. It was April. The relentless rain against my window felt like a metaphor. I was stuck. I had a budget, but I needed more capital to buy more income-generating assets. A second job felt like a prison sentence, trading more time for dollars, the exact opposite of the philosophy I was trying to test. Then I read something: the richest people in the world look for and build networks, everyone else looks for work. I didn't have a network. But I did have a skill. I knew how to use a video editing software inside and out. Could that be my asset? The first action was born from pure frustration. I'd spent hours editing a video for my day job, using a specific, tedious technique to remove a background. I thought someone would pay to not have to figure this out. That was the spark. That night, instead of watching a show, I screen recorded myself doing the edit. I talked through the process, step by step. I packaged it into a 15-minute tutorial. I called it the green screen fix for beginners. It felt stupid. It felt obvious. But I uploaded it to a platform that sold digital downloads. I set the price at $9.99. I remember the final click of publish. The product was now live. My business was open. The silence was deafening. For 3 weeks, nothing. Not a single view. I'd refresh the dashboard dozens of times a day, hearing the faint whir of my laptop fan, the only sound my new business was making. The struggle was against immense self-doubt. Was my idea dumb? Was the thumbnail bad? I was following Kiyosaki's advice to mind my own business, but my business was a ghost town. I had to learn about keywords, SEO, and how to write a product description that didn't sound like it was written by a robot. I was no longer just an editor, I was a marketer, a salesperson, and a customer service rep for a product that had no customers. The win came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was deep in my actual day job, and my personal phone, face down on the desk, vibrated with a specific tone I'd assigned to my store app. I ignored it. Probably another notification about nothing. An hour later, I checked. My heart stopped. There it was. You've made a sale. A complete stranger, somewhere in the world, had paid $9.99 for my dumb little tutorial. The PayPal ping that followed was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. It wasn't the money, it was the validation. The asset had generated revenue while I was working for someone else. The reality is, it didn't turn into a torrent of money. I made 2 more sales that month. But I had proven the model. I created an asset for a few hours of work that now had the potential to pay me indefinitely. The lesson was crystal clear: Kiyosaki's focus on building business assets isn't about swinging for $1 billion home run. It's about the mindset of creating systems that work for you. The value isn't in the product itself, but in the proof that you can build a system that generates value independently of your time. But that small win created a new problem. A $30 windfall. According to my Dave Ramsey budget, this was extra. It didn't have a job. And that's when the two philosophies in my head had their first direct confrontation. What was the right thing to do with this new income? I had $30.27 of profit sitting in my PayPal account. It was May. To most, it's coffee money. To me, it was the epicenter of the entire Dave versus Robert debate. I could literally feel the two voices arguing in my head. Dave's voice was clear, disciplined, that's $30 toward your debt snowball. Every dollar has a job. Robert's voice was provocative, strategic, that's seed capital. Reinvest it into your business asset. Make it grow. I sat at this desk, the two books staring at me from the shelf. This was no longer theoretical. This was a real financial decision with real philosophical weight. The first action was one of pure Dave Ramsey. I opened my budget spreadsheet. I had a student loan with a $2,300 balance. It was my smallest non-mortgage debt. I created a new line item, debt snowball, side hustle profit. I logged into my loan servicer's website, ready to make an extra principal payment of $30.27. My finger hovered over the mouse. But I couldn't click. The other voice was too loud. What if that $30 could be used to make $60? I closed the tabs. I didn't make the payment. The action I took was inaction. And the guilt was immediate. The following 2 weeks were a masterclass in rationalization. I'd look at the student loan balance and feel a knot in my stomach. I was choosing not to pay it down. I was being irresponsible. But then I'd open my digital store dashboard. What if I used that $30 to pay for a better thumbnail design service? Or to boost a Facebook post about my tutorial? Could I make the asset grow? The struggle was entirely internal. The sound was the constant, low hum of anxiety. I was breaking the rules of my own system. The learning curve was about understanding that personal finance is, first and foremost, personal. The turning point wasn't a financial event, it was a mental one. I was driving to work, stuck in traffic, and it just clicked. I realized I was asking the wrong question. The question wasn't, Dave or Robert. The question was, what is the goal of this specific dollar? The $30 wasn't just money, it was a tool. And different tools have different jobs. I pulled over and typed a note into my phone. I would split it. I would give each philosophy its due. Here's what I did. I took $15.13 and made an extra principal payment on my student loan. The feeling of seeing that balance tick down was deeply satisfying. It was a guaranteed return, the interest I wouldn't pay. The other $15.14, I reinvested. I used a cheap online service to create a more professional thumbnail and description for my tutorial. The lesson was the most valuable one yet. This isn't a war where you must pick a side. It's a toolkit. Sometimes you need the hammer of disciplined debt destruction. Sometimes you need the scalpel of strategic investment. Dogma is the enemy of progress. We classify this as a hybrid maneuver. The win wasn't in the amount, it was in breaking the false binary and taking purposeful action from both playbooks. This small compromise unlocked a new way of thinking. If I could use both tools, what would happen if I really scaled it up? What if I applied the same hybrid logic to my largest financial obligation, my mortgage? The next file in this case is where the experiment got real, and the stakes got much, much higher. The first 4 files were about building a foundation and testing small-scale tactics. They were the lab experiments. But a true reality test has to confront the biggest financial decision of most people's lives. For me, that was my mortgage. It was the embodiment of everything both gurus talked about. Dave sees it as a chain of debt to be obliterated. Robert sees it as good debt, a tool to leverage a large asset. I had to know which path was right for my life. This is the final file. File P log 2025-05, the mortgage gambit. It was July. The summer sun was bright, but my financial future felt clouded. I was staring at my monthly mortgage statement. A $1,850 payment. $1,200 of it was interest. That number, the interest, felt like a leak in my financial boat I was constantly bailing out. I had built a small dividend stream and a tiny digital business. My budget was airtight. I had an emergency fund. According to Dave's baby steps, I was at step 6, pay off the mortgage early. But another part of me had been captivated by Kiyosaki's arguments about using banking systems and leverage. This wasn't about $30 anymore. This was about my home. The first action was one of deep research, not impulsive action. I didn't call my bank to increase my payments. Instead, I called a trusted financial advisor, a fee-only fiduciary, not someone trying to sell me a product. I asked them to run the numbers. 2 scenarios. 1, I take every extra dollar from my side hustles and throw it at the mortgage principal. 2, I take those same extra dollars and invest them in a broad market index fund. I needed to see the math, stripped of all emotion and ideology. The first significant action was committing to a $500 consultation to get a cold, hard, mathematical reality check. The 2 weeks waiting for the report were agonizing. The conflict was no longer just in my head, it was on paper. I'd lie awake at night, hearing the quiet of the house, this asset that was also my largest liability. I'd think about the security of owning it free and clear. No bank could ever take it. That felt powerful. Then I'd run a compound interest calculator on my phone. The potential growth of decades of invested capital, even a small amount, was staggering. The struggle was between the psychological peace of being debt-free and the mathematical likelihood of building greater wealth through the market. The learning curve was about understanding opportunity cost, the price of the road not taken. The win wasn't a single moment, but a series of revelations from the advisor's report. The numbers were clear. Historically, the average return of the S&P 500 significantly outperformed my 4.5% mortgage interest rate. Mathematically, investing the extra money was the winning move. But the report also included a caveat: this assumes a high risk tolerance and a long time horizon. The psychological benefit of a paid-for home is not quantifiable. That was the turning point. I realized the right answer wasn't in a book. It was in me. I had to be honest about what kind of person I was. Could I stomach market volatility, knowing I could have been chipping away at my mortgage? I made my choice. I chose a hybrid path, but one that leaned decisively toward opportunity. I decided to split my extra capital. 25% would go toward making an extra mortgage principal payment each quarter. This satisfied the Dave Ramsey part of my brain, giving me that tangible progress and psychological win. The remaining 75% would be automatically invested into a low-cost index fund every month. This was the Kiyosaki move, using leverage and seeking a higher return. The reality is, this isn't a flashy decision. There's no big party. The lesson was the culmination of the entire experiment. Personal finance is not about finding the one right guru. It's about building your own philosophy from first principles, understanding math, and being brutally honest about your own psychology. At ProfitWithA, we classify this as a synthesized strategy. The ultimate win is building a system that is both mathematically intelligent and psychologically sustainable for you. 5 case files. 1 year. And the question I started with, Dave Ramsey or Robert Kiyosaki, turned out to be the wrong question entirely. What these files show isn't a winner or a loser. They show a spectrum. On one end, the unshakable power of discipline, focus, and guaranteed returns. On the other, the explosive potential of opportunity, leverage, and building systems. The zero-based budget gave me control. The dividend stock gave me a new perspective. The digital product gave me an asset. The $30 confrontation taught me to think in tools, not tribes. And the mortgage decision, it taught me that the most powerful financial plan is the one you build yourself, tailored to your own psychology and your own goals. Dave Ramsey's plan is the ultimate defense. It's a fortress. It will protect you from yourself and from life's storms. Robert Kiyosaki's philosophy is the ultimate offense. It's a map to new territory. It's about building an empire. But you can't launch an offense from a vulnerable position. And you can't spend your entire life only playing defense if you want to build real wealth. The 2025 reality test proved that the most productive path isn't a choice between the two. It's a sequence. Build your fortress first. Secure your foundation. Then, and only then, begin your expansion. Don't wait for perfect conditions or the perfect guru to give you permission. Start where you are. Use what you have. If you're in debt, embrace the power of focus and get your budget on zero. That is your first, most important win. And when you get that first win, no matter how small, see it for what it is, proof that a door has opened. That's your signal to start looking for the next one. If you've started your own hustle, if you've run your own money experiments, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments below. Your case file could be the one we break down in a future profit log. Subscribe to ProfitWithA and hit the notification bell. This isn't about selling you a dream, it's about documenting the real, practical steps, just like we did today. The next file we open could be the one that changes your entire game. This has been a productive one from ProfitWithA. Until next time, keep building your fortress. And keep mapping your empire.